Session 1 Topic 1 Introduction on SAP. So what is SAP? Whenever I hear this word SAP, a funny story pops in my mind. During my early days of my career, I called it as SAP instead of SAP. Not just me, even my friends used to call this as SAP. And that was continuing for a while until I had this funny encounter with one of my client, where when I mentioned SAP to him, right, he didn't have any clue on what it is. So that's when I made sure I will never use the word SAP for referring SAP. If you look at the literal meaning for SAP, SAP is nothing but the juice that flows out of that plant when a bark of a plant is cut. That's called SAP. So you should never call it as SAP. If you're someone who is calling it as SAP, please make sure you don't call it as SAP. It's always SAP. It's a German software based company and it stands for System, Application and Products in Data Processing. Originally it was named in German. When it became global, for the ease of convenience and usability, they changed it into English translate. So that's System, Application and Products in Data Processing. So if you look at the size and scale of SAP, SAP employs about 100k employees to build their product. These are direct employees who are working on the product solution. It could be enhancement, it could be new feature, or it could be some support engagements with customers or vendors who uses SAP. So it employs directly 100k employees for building and managing their product. And if you look at the indirect employment or indirect employees, so all their customers who uses SAP, they have their own SAP team. It could be functional, technical, so many roles are there. I'll cover it in my later session. So if you look at that count, it will be 100x the times of direct employees. So it's like 100k into 100 employees are indirectly working on SAP. So that's how big of company it is. And if you look at the market capitalization, it's 370 billion as of 2025. And they make an annual revenue of 27 billion in the year 2025. So that's too big of a company. It's too big to fail. That's how it is now. And if you look at the beginning of SAP, right, it had a very humble beginning. It was originally built by 5 German ex-IBM employees. From 5, it has become to 1000k employees. That's how the growth of SAP is. So in the next 2 slides, I'll try to build my case strong on as why you have to learn SAP. So if you look at my next slide, so these are logos of some of the top companies in the world. So there are some pattern you would see from this slide. So all these are billion-dollar companies and all these are specialized in different business verticals. We have beverage company, we have automobile company, we have banking company, we have FMCG company, we have life science companies, and we have airline companies. These are players in diverse business verticals. And there's one commonality among all these big companies. All these companies uses SAP. If you're someone whose dream is to work in one of these big companies, I would highly suggest that you learn SAP. So now let me make it more interesting for you. So these are some of the facts about SAP. So if you look at the global market, 80% of the Fortune 1000 companies runs on SAP and 87% of the global 2000 companies run SAP, and over 300,000 companies in 180 countries run SAP. That's how big of a company it is, and that's the footprint that SAP has across the world. They are the dominant player, they are the industry leader. And if you take the remaining 20 and 13%, right, those uses Microsoft CRM or Oracle CRM or some other ERP companies. So SAP is the dominant leader in the ERP space. Now I guess you would have got some clarity on as why you should learn SAP. We'll cover about what are the different roles that are available in SAP. I am proficient in SAP Performance Testing, so in all my future courses I'll be talking about SAP relevant for performance testing and engineering. Now we know what is SAP, how big of a company it is. Now let's try to understand the evolution of SAP. As I already mentioned, SAP was originally built by 5 IBM ex-employees. That was the beginning. So these 5 IBM ex-employees started a company. They were working for one of the chemical industry, were building a software for that chemical industry. So the original software that they built was just for doing the financial transaction and reconciliation. So that was the original software. That was the original beginning of SAP. So they built this software for the chemical industry. It's a finance transaction recording and reconciliation software, and it was built on the IBM mainframe system. So it's just one single tier architecture that was deployed on mainframe for doing the financial transaction and reconciliation. So it's a single tier architecture. That was the beginning of SAP. From there, they later in the 1970s and 80s, right, they moved it to two-tier architecture, where there were two systems, logically two systems, right? We have anyone can log into the mainframe terminal and get connected to this backend system, which is again built on the IBM mainframe. So multiple people using multiple terminals were able to access this software in a centralized space. So from single tier they moved to two tier, and from two tier in the early 2000s, so they moved it to a three tier architecture. Now let's try to dive into the evolution of SAP. As I already said, so SAP was originally developed by 5 IBM ex-employees. It was just a financial transaction and reconciliation software. So they built this software in the mainframe platform. So they had all the 3 logical components: presentation, application, and database wrapped into one software monolithic architecture. And it was originally serving only one module of business, that's the financial accounting and financial accounting and reconciliation. So from there they moved it to R2, which is logically a two-tier architecture. If you look at the presentation tier, so those were terminals that can connect to IBM mainframe, and we have the application stack on the mainframe. Now we have multiple users that can access the software from different IBM terminals. From there it moved to the three-tier architecture. So now let's dive into the history or the evolution of SAP. How it evolved from a simple software that was built by 5 IBM ex-employees, right? From there, how it moved to this big of a product, which is used by all these multi-billion-dollar companies, right? So let's look at the evolution of SAP. So in the early 1970s, as I said, they built this simple software solution for one of their chemical industry, for serving just one purpose, one module. That's financial accounting and reconciliation. So they built that software. That product that they built, right, that was built on a single tier architecture, where they had all the client, application, and database wrapped into one single software solution, a monolithic software. Okay, so that was the original product that was built in the 1972. Single tier architecture serving just one business model, that's financial accounting. And from there, in the late 1970s, that's 1979, they introduced this two-tier architecture. Now from single tier it moved to two-tier architecture, where it had a client and a application and a database server separately. So they had this logical separation. So now we have a solution we have a software that can be accessed from different mainframe terminals. Okay, so from single tier, which can be accessed by only one person, where the software is deployed, it has moved to a two-tier architecture, where we have a centralized application and database tier, which can be accessed by multiple users connected to different terminals. And from there it moved to the client server architecture. This was the time when desktops were OS operating system, where Bill Gates was becoming a billionaire, right? So that was the time when personal computers has become so easily accessible. So at that point of time they moved to this three-tier architecture, where they had the client and the application server and the database all separate. So in this three-tier architecture, what they had was they had this thick client or the software that was deployed in their desktop PCs, and using that that thick client can talk with the application server, and from application server it goes to the database server. So they built this robust three-tier architecture. Alongside, they also increased their business capability. From accounting they tried HR, CRM, so many different other business modules also they incorporated in that three-tier architecture. And in the year 2000, when the dot-com bust was happening, right? So internet was buzzword during that time. So at that time, even they introduced web version of SAP. So now from thick client they moved to thin client. The SAP can be accessed from a web browser. So in the browser, if we type mysap.com and give the credentials, now we have access to the SAP system. So it moved from thick client to thin client in the year 2000. So from there they moved to the service oriented architecture, which is an extension of the 3-tier architecture. So now they were able to integrate with non-SAP product using that SAP SOA architecture. They were able to communicate with non-SAP system as well. So that was one of the biggest turning point in SAP history. Till this point, SAP was dependent on other database system like Oracle or DBMS, right? In the year 2011-12, they introduced their own database, SAP HANA, which had more flexibility, and from there it has become a biggest growth story. And I think I forgot to mention the R1 in the initial products, right? It referred to the real-time processing. So that's what R signifies. They're using that for quite some time, and now it's SAP HANA. Now the product is named as SAP S4 HANA. That's the latest version of SAP. So that's the growth story of SAP and the evolution of SAP over time. So with this, we are concluding our topic 1, and the key takeaway from this session is you should know what is SAP, how big of a company it is, so what are the different companies that uses SAP, and a little bit of history of SAP in terms of architecture, right? Just for your understanding. These are the 3 key takeaways from today's topic. See you in the next topic. Thank you. Bye.